annual meeting. The first that I will call the meeting to order, subject section 19. Is it section 1983 still, Wisconsin State Statutes? Is that fair to say? First item is Pledge of Allegiance. So, Steve, would you care to lead us with the pledge?
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so this meeting's run a little differently. It's a chance for the community to come together and vote and voice opinion on the resolutions. So the first item here that we will go through is to elect.
Guys, it sounds like you can hear us because you did the pledge. I hopped in here, I muted them, so for the time being we can just talk to each other and they don't see it on the screen. Do you want to test your screen share or anything?
Can somebody, he's not talking to us, can you let him know he has an open mic?
Oh, they can hear it, I can see him, I got it.
But can they hear us?
Okay, I'm okay talking.
We're good?
Yep.
So are we ready to keep going here then?
Yes.
Okay, so the first, item number 3 we are on is to elect a chairperson for the annual meeting. Would anybody care to make a nomination for that?
I nominate Mike Madsen as chair.
So we have a nomination and a second for myself to be the chairperson for the annual meeting. Let's do it all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that motion passes. I'll take on the responsibility as chairperson for the annual meeting. Thank you. Next item 4, is to adopt the agenda. I assume there's no changes, Dr. Spikuza?
That is correct.
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. Next item is to review the minutes from the 2019 annual meeting. Rick, will those be?
Yep, it'll be 1 second as we
Okay.
pull those up. Sorry, I was asleep at the wheel. They were already on the bottom. There we go. So these are the minutes from a year ago. They're unapproved. They're approved on an annual basis. The business items are the typical with the adoption of the tax levy, the salaries of the board members that was raised at that time to $2,000, the resolution to reimburse board members, and then to set the annual meeting date.
I'll move to approve the minutes of last year's meeting.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, that motion carries. So we'll move on to item 6, State of the Union District, run by Dr. Spikuza here.
Yeah. It might be easier to do the State of the Union
Yeah.
Compared to the State of the District, but there we go. All right, so tonight I just wanted to thank everybody for being here. This is a technological feat. Right now we do have 2 additional guests that are going to be presenting right after this introduction, and we have 2 guests. One is SDS Architects with Chelsea Vors, and then we also have Baird Public Financing with Lisa Vossen. They will be presenting due to COVID from their offices. It will be presented up on the screen, but also then simulcast live to anybody that is home viewing. One of the challenges, however, and from the legal references, is that the annual community meeting does require individuals to be present for any voting. So the people in the seats and that our community members are the ones that will be voting tonight. I also wanted to thank the opening of our school. Next week, we do have our school board meeting, our regular school board meeting on the 23rd. And you'll see some information coming forward tonight that will be discussed in more detail and likely some business actions. COVID has definitely captivated our immediate attention, both globally and locally. I want to let the community know that we continue to alter our educational models and practices to mitigate the virus as best we can. Breaking news today, and I thought it was imperative that I make sure that I speak to the whole community, is that as of Monday, on the 14th, we did move our high school to a hybrid where students virtually are working at home on Monday, and then we have an AA-BB group with a red and blue. That cuts the number of students that are on site at any one time by 50%, but 100% of the students are participating in real time with their teachers based on the investments and technological feats of both Andy Holland and Kyle Flaherty, who have set up this meeting. As of today, we also hit the burden rate of above 10, which is moving our middle school to hybrid beginning Monday, the 21st. That is also a virtual day, so students are expected to sign on. We are using the next 2 days to help transition the students to make sure they understand the red and blue group. I want to thank my 2 secondary principals and the technology group and our nursing staff, Cassie and Mel, for navigating these waters incredibly well, and also for the communication that's gone out both in letter format but also by video. Thank you very much. In addition, we did have a positive case at our Malone Elementary, and due to how we are setting up the classrooms as homerooms and they're with the students all day, we do have 1 class that is quarantined for the next 14 days. Because the 28th is a date only for professional development, those students will be coming back on site for Malone Elementary on September 29th. Let me be clear, as we continue to work with Pierce County Health, we're always taking the safety of our staff, and you'll hear more about that later as well, and our students at the highest level of concern. But as we move and transition, I just want to reaffirm that PSD is not shirking its responsibility to provide high-quality education for our students. And we're going to continue to partner and assist families as we navigate this next set of challenges. I want to just remind people that we have been able to invest in additional Chromebooks at the secondary level, waiting for those to arrive. All our teachers are receiving high-caliber cameras so that we can live stream the communication for our core classes. Our electives tend to be recorded and happen off at what we call asynchronous time, and that's recorded, and our teachers are available during the instructional day for connections, as well as our counselors and school psychologists. In addition, as you see behind me, our school board worked long and hard in partnership with the community, our teachers, and many different stakeholders to adopt our mission, vision, and values. And one of the things that we work on and continue is that our vision is our North Star, and that's at the center of the presentation behind me. Our mission is to inspire lifelong learners for future success. And we have a strategic direction that has 5 specific goals that continue to allow us to marshal on our resources and our organization to achieve, ultimately, that vision through meeting each and every day to perform and allow our students to perform for future success. So, as we kind of transition, we understand that COVID is the 3-ton elephant that continues to be in this room and sometimes on our back. But just like COVID, time marches on, and it doesn't stop for anyone. It waits for no one, time, and we are continuing to do our work to audit our facilities and our facility plan that examines the functional equipment and structures that go beyond generations and generational obligations. A year ago today, in August and September, we were working with SDS architects to look at items like our middle school boilers, our roofs, our HVAC systems, brickwork, and windows. And these are generational costs that occur every 20 to 25 years and go beyond any 1 year fiscal budget. As we continue to proceed through this meeting, you'll start to see how those finances come together. And we'll be talking about School Financing 101, and we will also be presenting the budget through our finance coordinator, Renee Peterson. The board's strategic directions, the first 3 are all pillars about student learning. We wanted to provide educational opportunities that maximize learning for all. An equity pledge by the district. We provide high quality instruction, whether or not students are off campus or on site. And we invest in our teachers through professional development to make sure that they understand the new technology and our new academic models. Today's meeting with the electorate of Prescott Public Schools is going to focus on the last 2 strategic directions. And that is our fiscal responsibility, the investments that we make in our learning environments, and to make sure that we continue to invest in our 4 buildings that are within our portfolio and ensure that the staffing and programs continue. In addition, our goal and what's paramount, whether or not it's physical safety, health and well-being, psychological, we are looking to make sure that we provide safe and respectful environments, facilities, and working environments for all. As I mentioned, we have the benefit of working with 2 very talented individuals and 2 talented agencies. We're going to have SDS architects present first and give an update with regards to plans that we're looking at to go beyond infrastructure, but to ensure that everybody understands that the board is committed to retaining and maintaining all 4 of its school buildings, and for educational reasons, currently looking at the flexibility of staffing and programming and placing grade 3 students back into our elementary level. In addition, when we look at the strategic direction and understand that safety is paramount not only of the board, the administration, but also a community value that plays out on many of our surveys, we wanted to make sure that we could look at conceptual considerations of adding a new front entrance to both Malone Elementary and our intermediate school. These new entryways would be secure and controlled to increase the safety of our children and our staff. It would be very similar to the way that we control entrances at the high school. And we want to make sure that that is an equitable opportunity for all students and all staff. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Chelsea with SDS Architects to present the narrowed options that the board has been looking at. They've kind of scaled those through workshops and board meetings. In addition, SDS will provide a conceptual look for considering a new front entrance for the Malone and the intermediate. Thank you. Now we're going to transition. I'm going to give over my screen and microphone to the technology individuals, and all the information will come up here as we have, is it Dale and Chelsea? They just slid off the screen. I know they're there.
Hello.
We can hear you.
Buy one, get one free tonight.
We're here nonetheless.
Okay. We can now see you.
In very large scale.
Must be very frightening for the folks in the seats.
So welcome.
Thank you. And as Rick mentioned, I'm Chelsea Bors, an architect here at SDS.
I'm Dale Pointer, principal. You already gave an intro for what we had done in the past. I don't know that we need to go through that, and that was gonna kind of be my job, but just remember, we did a facility assessment starting.
And Dale, are you able, excuse me, are you able to talk a little bit louder, or Kyle, can you adjust the mic?
We can pull our mic.
Got it.
Yeah, that should.
I'm just a soft-spoken guy.
There you go. Thank you.
No problem. So, we had just come across some common issues at most of the facilities, whether it was with, bus and parent, vehicular kind of conflict or drop-off issues, secure entrances, some lack of visibility at offices and school entrances, system problems, at some facilities particularly, HVAC and electrical and that sort of thing being toward its end of useful life. We discovered, and you already knew, that there was an abundance of space, particularly at the intermediate school. There's issues with special ed and everything. So we've gone through all of that some time ago. And what Chelsea and I, but particularly Chelsea, has been putting the lion's share in on putting together some options, as you mentioned, looking at how some of these issues might best be resolved at the different facilities. So you've got your pathways and.
Yeah, so I was just gonna share my screen and kind of take a look with a couple of visuals of what we've been working with the district and the administration and the board and where we are currently at.
Thank you.
In our building concepts, so. See. Oh, do you need to give us?
Says the host has disabled our ability to share.
I think you might need to give us permission to share.
Try again.
There we go. All right.
We can see it. Thank you.
All right, great. So what has kind of developed is two different pathways, as we've been referring to them as. Both pathways, as Rick mentioned previously, maintain all 4 buildings in the district's portfolio. Pathway 1 operates 4 schools with students in all 4 buildings, and Pathway 2 operates 4 buildings with students in 3 schools, and they are evaluating utilizing the middle school for some non-student uses, but still district use. So looking at the Pathway 1 and the elementary concept is going to be the same in both pathways. So we'll just kind of look at this concept once, but as Dale and Rick both mentioned, some of the priorities and some of the challenges that we have found throughout this process is, the safe and secure entryway is, or lack thereof, some of the site circulation and keeping the students safe for bus and parent drops. There's a little bit of inadequacy in some special education programming, STEM programming, and then there are the infrastructure, MEP system, some just general building items that are nearing their end of useful life. So that's the common theme that you're gonna see each of these concepts address. And how we are looking at achieving and resolving those items at the elementary school to start is creating the safe and secure entryway, bringing the office, which is currently in the west end of the building of this wing here, and we bring that up to the front, right front and center, creating a safe and secure entry, vestibule controlled, looking at potentially creating an additional parking lot where also has a visual eye on it from the office, and that'll also kind of clear up some of the congestion that currently exists with some of the bus drop here. That would free up moving those offices and some of the special education programming up front would free up some space at number 3, which could be dedicated for STEM and the library. And the relocation of the library then, in turn, would free up the existing library to locate the cafeteria here. Currently, the cafeteria is located in the gym, and it creates pretty significant scheduling conflicts, maintenance, just cleaning up that space every day by having to have lunch in the middle of the gym each day. So having a dedicated cafeteria would solve a lot of scheduling issues there, and they'd look at also some special education programming. But and along with this package, as Rick mentioned, the grade configuration changes here to include 3rd grade, and that would really utilize, I believe it's this whole bank of classrooms, 4 classrooms per grade level that are currently not empty, but one person has an office in a classroom, where they're very underutilized. So utilizing that space that's already there, that's already open. These people are not going to be displaced. The purposes happening there can happen in many other space, and so that's kind of, this has gone through many iterations, but this is kind of the concept where we're at that has best addressed all of the priorities and the goals of the board and the district to create that safe and secure situation and the other items that we discussed. So this is the current concept that we're looking at the elementary. And I guess, just these other items too, not to be lost, are we would be addressing the remaining MEP systems, any building repairs, envelope repairs that are really needed to make sure that the investments within the building will last. Kind of the same backstory to updating some of the finishes, lighting, painting, giving it a fresh look.
Chelsea?
Yeah.
This is Rick. I just wanted to let both anybody that's in the audience tonight, as well as people from the community that may be stopping at our facilities, is that we do have kind of printouts of this on poster board. And so anybody in the audience tonight, if you go back outside in the lobby, it'll have Pathway 1 and Pathway 2, so you can kind of see the schemata and take a little bit more time to understand it.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. So, and again, these are the process where we're at now. We are master planning. We are looking ahead to the future and trying to make the best decisions. Looking ahead at what a concept might be. So this is not a building project. This is not, we're all in the kind of conceptual phase where we're just throwing ideas around and making sure we're achieving different goals. And this is kind of just a big picture master planning effort at this point. So moving over to the Malone Intermediate School, in this pathway 1, where we've got the maintaining 4 buildings and operating 4 buildings. The configuration at Malone Intermediate would serve 6th, 7th, and 8th grades. One thing we identified in the study, and I'm sure anyone in these buildings is aware, is their intermediate does have a lot of, an abundance of open, underutilized space, open classrooms right now, as it used to be at the old high school. There's just a lot of open areas throughout the building. Science labs or face rooms that aren't necessarily suiting the needs of the grade levels that are now in this building, or not even needed by the grade levels currently in here. So along with those items, plus that common kind of safe and secure entry, making sure that our drop-offs and site circulation is in order, STEM and special education, that's the same items that the district and administration board have made sure that they want to address in these concepts. So you're going to see the same kind of thing going on here. We'd look at creating, in this concept, a safe and secure entryway right in the front of the building where they can keep an eye on both the bus drop off, and we would plan on relocating the parent drop. The current way it's done, it's very congested. They have to have a separate kind of supervision situation going on over here. They come in at the other end of the building. It's not ideal. So getting that up front, but keeping it separate from the bus for safety purposes. But having that office be able to kind of be your hub, your visual connection. They can keep an eye on all of that action going on out front. So that would be a big part of the work to be done here at the intermediate. In the other yellow areas, those are going to indicate some remodeling areas. So here is a spot where the existing office used to be, which we're moving out. So these would potentially turn into classrooms, back into classrooms. The square footage is just about right for 2 classrooms to be there. As I mentioned, some of those space and science labs, we would clear those out, get the lab tables, the sinks, get those out of there and make those spaces that can be utilized by the grade levels that are going to be here. Creating some STEM space, and by creating, we're not building new. This is like an existing, the maintenance area, and whether that may be ample space for STEM, and we're looking at choir. So just matching the programming and academic spaces with the 6, 7, and 8 grade levels that would be in this building are the main adjustments to be made at the intermediate for this pathway. And then the number 5 potential, just to cover that one, is would be looking at a new maintenance shed to displace the space taken up in the building, which would be a nice situation as well. And then similar to the elementary, they would be looking at addressing the remaining HVAC items that are nearing the end of their service life. There's some roofing needs here as well, and also some finish. There's quite a bit of asbestos tile in the intermediate that currently is not a immediate concern, but if any work were to happen, we always suggest abatement and or in case, sealing it up and encapsulating it. So moving on for pathway 1 to the middle school. The middle school, one of the kind of big things that came out of the facility assessment for that building was the lack of space, kind of the exact opposite of what you've got at the intermediate and the elementary. Not a lot of space for collaboration. The classrooms are full. The STEM is kind of busting at the seams and stuff like that. So with this pathway, we take the grade level, I believe, 6 out of there, and bring 4th and 5th, just have 4th and 5th here. So that would free up some space to do some additional special education programming, get a little bit more space for STEM potentially. The program's not being a little bit different from the 6, 7, 8 needs too. So looking at a 4th and 5th option. There are some items to address at this building, just kind of physical needs, you could almost call them. Some PA and fire alarm systems, keeping those up to code, and addressing all the HVAC, electrical, plumbing needs that are nearing the end of their service life. And there are quite a few exterior building deficiencies at the middle school that the district's been working on currently upgrading, but there would be some remaining bigger ticket items, tuck pointing, masonry repairs, things to avoid any bigger issues in the future, just really maintaining that building envelope. And then also looking at the core finish update here, giving it a fresh coats of paint, looking at some flooring replacement, lighting, etc. So that's that pathway 1. Oh yeah, high school just remains as is. So again, pathway 1, maintaining the 4 buildings and operating 4 as schools. Moving on to pathway 2, being the maintaining the 4 buildings, operating 3 schools, and repurposing the middle school for district office and any community district programming uses that exist currently. And a lot of those happen right now and the lower level of the intermediate. So we already talked about the elementary, nothing changing here from pathway 1. We're still addressing all the exact same needs, entryway, STEM, special education, gym, cafeteria complex, and then some of the site circulation. Moving on to the intermediate, the grade configuration here is what changes. So the pathway 1 was serving grades 6, 7, 8. They're looking at the pathway 2 the intermediate has the capacity to serve 4th, 5th, and 6th, 7th, and 8th groups of grades. So with the pathway 1 there, even with that reconfiguration, there still would be some open spaces. So this grade configuration really fills in the building and leaves no underutilized space. So all the line items here really are the same. We're addressing the safe and secure entryway. We are remodeling that STEM space. Got that maintenance building. We're remodeling the old high school science and FACE rooms to better accommodate the grade levels. Looking at the same site items. The only difference here is with the addition of the 4th and 5th graders, the cafeteria may just go under a slight redesign so that they are able to serve the student enrollment here. There would still be, sections happening and all that good stuff, but with that capacity, there may be a few redesigns just needing to happen to provide a little bit more square footage for students in the cafeteria. And then the other change from pathway 1 in this concept for the intermediate is that district office on the lower level it's an exact classroom right now, just compartmentalized within, so that would get remodeled back into a classroom, and then you'd have room for 2 grade levels on the lower level in the existing layout as it is. Still addressing the HVAC, electrical plumbing items, and still looking to update finishes, painting, flooring, casework, lighting. Then the middle school in this pathway, as we mentioned, would no longer have any grade levels there. So that would look at repurposing it into the district office and any district community and programming uses. So with that, there are a few items that drop off the table. We no longer would need to update the PA system. We no longer would need to replace the unit ventilators in every single classroom because there won't be students using the building. So there are a few things that drop off of the needs list at that building if there was no student use here. Still want to take care of the critical building system items. We don't want to lose track of the MEP systems or the building exterior because we still got people in there we still want to maintain and keep it up. And so those items, the critical items would still be addressed, both exterior building items and the MEP items. And then for the most part though, all the space within the middle school, we've evaluated and it is able to be used as is for the district office for some of the special education programming, some of the youth and community ed and rec programs. A lot of those uses would be able to utilize the existing spaces as they currently sit today. So, and then again, the high school, nothing happening over there. So those are the 2 pathways that we've kind of been working on for the past 6 or 8 months, going through many iterations, going down one road, looking at tons of different options, and kind of this is where we've landed to do our best to meet all of those goals and priorities that were identified after that study, a lot of them relating to the safety and security of their students and staff, so. Yeah.
Dale and Chelsea, thank you for that presentation. Being able to walk through, for any of the parents that are currently dropping their students off at the intermediate school, you'll see that Principal Kozmowski has already kind of retrofitted the drop-off. One of the challenges that we have is, as long as it's good weather, the plastic signs and the plastic barrels work, but some of the redesign here would be more permanent, obviously, and creating additional safety for our students. Do we need, if anybody had a question for Chelsea or Dale before we transition to School Finance 101? Okay.
All right. So we're on to item 6C, school financing.
We're going to transition to,
Thank you, Chelsea, thank you.
Thanks.
Lisa Vossen is on the line with Baird. And she's going to cover two areas. One is information that will be coming to the board next week on a possibility of refinancing at a historic low rates, either some or all of the bonds that were sold to create the high school and the Performing Arts Center. And then to talk about additional options for voter approved to cover the costs that would be associated with the conceptual designs that SDS just presented. So, Lisa?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I can hear you very well too. We had a trial run earlier in the week, and it's really nice how this is working out. And thank you for, I think virtual is starting to go away, so I might be able to start traveling in October. That's what they're telling us, so that'll feel good. Okay, so thanks for having me back. It's good to see all of you. I know there's some familiar faces on the board from the last time we went through this process. So what I want to do, as Rick said, I'm going to review the debt, talk about an opportunity that you have for refinancing, and then just kind of a review, you know, how we fund a facility project, just some basic review slides, because I know a lot of you have been through this before. You have quite a few debt issues out there. The good news is we have board-approved debt on the left-hand side. We have two debt issues that are at really low interest rates. No need to be refinancing those. We issued that debt for energy purposes, so you're in really good shape with those two debt issues. One's being paid off in 28 and the other one in 32. And then the voter-approved debt, we paid off the 2010 bonds this year, so great job, board. So that one's gone. You have three debt issues remaining, 2012, 2014, and 2015. And those are the three debt issues that we are considering refinancing. They're at some are up in that 4% range, and we're in the 2% range right now in terms of interest rates for this type of borrowing. So we're looking at, again, 2012, 2014, 2015, you can see the last payments, 25, 34, and 34. If we do refinance, we are not going to be extending the debt on any of these. They would have the same term. We would just lower the payments and produce some savings for the district. So that's just kind of a summary of your debt. Then if you look at your principal and interest payments on your debt, that's what this bar chart is showing, is the four debt issues that have that are still outstanding. So it's relatively level, a little bit increasing in the beginning, but otherwise it's pretty right under that $3 million mark. So those are your annual principal and interest payments on all your voter approved debt. So if we added new voter approved debt, we would try to wrap around these payments a little bit. You would have smaller payments for these up till 2034, and then we'd have most of the amortization after that for any kind of new voter approved debt. So interest rates right now, this goes back to actually just after I started at Baird. I started at Baird in 1988. This starts in 1990, but you can see, I mean, back then districts were issuing bonds or borrowing money at 7.5%. And we're down into the low ones and, high ones, low twos right now. So we're at all-time lows in recorded history. That box in the upper right-hand corner is just a one-year snapshot. And you can see what COVID did to our world. It really rocked it in the middle there of that box in the upper right-hand corner. Just shows the volatility that COVID did to our market. And now it's just steadily been coming down. Interest rates have been slowly coming down, and you're not the only district in the state that's looking at the possibility of refinancing debt. There's many out there that are trying to take advantage of these low interest rates. So the next slide is just summarizing the debt issues individually and what their interest rates are versus what we could lock in, and then what the savings looks like. So we look at savings on a gross basis, so over the life of the loan, and then we look at it present value basis. So what does that mean in today's dollars to the district? So if you just go down to the total, your total gross savings is about $687,000 if we refinance. And that's direct savings to taxpayers. On a present value basis, it's $588,000. And this is just a snapshot in time. So tomorrow it might be $580,000, and the next day it might be, it changes because interest rates change. But I'm on the phone talking to my clients if that percentage, which is the next column over, is over 2%. So you're at 2.29. If it's over 2%, that's kind of an industry standard, that if you can save more than 2% of what you're refinancing, that it makes sense to do it. And so this, like I said, so each individual issue saves one is like the 2014 bonds is really carrying this whole refinancing, because the 2015 bonds, you're not over 2%. So we're gonna give ourselves the flexibility to pull that debt issue out, not refinance that 2015 bond issue if it's not producing enough savings. And we'll talk about that in a minute, but the annual savings on an annual basis is about $50,000 a year. And again, I'll say it again, because this is voter approved debt, it's gonna be saving direct taxpayer savings if we refinance. So the process would be to have the board adopt a parameters resolution. So I don't have the timeline in the slides, but essentially the next board meeting, you would just adopt a parameters resolution that would lay out the parameters for the refinancing. And then, I think we've done this before actually, and then once the parameters are adopted by the board, we at Baird can start watching the market, putting the paperwork together, and getting the refinancing done after that. So if that's something that you want to consider, we can move forward and start getting the paperwork done. I don't need any formal action from you. I just need a nod saying, yeah, that makes sense. We should probably pursue this. If interest rates go to 5% tomorrow, we wouldn't do anything, and you wouldn't be out anything. It wouldn't cost you anything if we all of a sudden had a surge in interest rates and we didn't refinance. So I'll pause there and just see if there's any questions about the refinancing.
I think the individuals in the House, I would think if they as they follow you, understanding that there would be a parameters adoption at the 23rd official board meeting, that savings annually would be directly to the taxpayers, and what we're looking at is refinancing at a lower rate based on what we're currently paying and currently the rates are at historical lows. I think it's something that's a wise investment for us to at least consider and look if we can execute.
That was a great summary, because I think, you know, from a board standpoint, those are the key bullet points that those are the takeaways on the refinancing, so. Okay, so we'll continue to move forward with that, and we'll watch the market on a daily basis and come back to you on the 23rd if it still is looking good for you. So I want to jump into just a reminder on financing a facility project, because how you finance a facility project depends on what it is that you're financing. Are you replacing a boiler, or are you putting major additions onto a school? And how much do you need? If it's a small project, we can usually go right to our operational funds. We can budget it in our annual budget. We have some different facility funds that we can turn to pay for smaller projects. But when you get into a larger project, like we did for the high school project, now you're talking about borrowed funds. So voter approved borrowing, going to the voters saying, can we borrow X to finance these facility projects? And then you pay it back over a period of time, just like I showed you on that previous bar chart. So what we're talking about tonight are projects that are voter approved because of the size. There's another way to borrow, but what we call a revenue limit to borrowing. And I think that was the left side of that page that I had showed previously, the board approved borrowing. But those funds to pay that back come out of your budget. And I know most districts it's a challenge to balance their budget, and they don't have room in their budget to be making these large debt payments. So again, we would be looking at borrowing funds for this size of a project. And I don't even think we have numbers. I think I have some very preliminary estimates on what size. And then just a reminder, on your school tax levy, as a board, it's about 9.2 million, and the voter approved debt on the right hand side there is 2.5 million, like we saw on the previous page. And that's what would increase if you had these projects, if you borrowed for these projects. The revenue limit side, the left hand side, that can only be increased, that tax levy, the 6.5 million, with voter approved operating referendum question, because that's limited by the state statutes. So these are a lot of numbers, and there's 3 different sections to your tax levy. The reason why I show this to you is because the district last year levied 9.2 million, and often people want to know, what does that mean to me, my tax bill? So I go right into my slide, and sometimes I'll show this to a community group to say, take that 9.2 million and do a mill rate calculation. Divide it by the property value, all of the value of the property in the district, and you come up with this mill rate per 1,000. So in your case, your mill rate last year was $10.75. The very easy way to calculate what does that mean to my taxes is just move the decimal over 2. And it's $1,075 on a $100,000 home. Double it if you have a $200,000 home. So that's the school portion of your tax bill. And it's easy to calculate when you know what the mill rate is. So that's the total mill rate for the district last year. And when you look at trending, it's been trending down. This is your historical mill rate. So the 1075 is on the right-hand side for 1920. I'm sure you're getting close to determining what that 2021 mill rate is going to be. But it was a little higher last year, and it was even higher in the previous 4 years. So that's good news. I mean, you're holding the line on taxes. They're coming down, and that I think that bodes well for the taxpayers. So again, moving the decimal over to your school tax on a $100,000 property would be $1,075. Okay. So that was just a little quick lesson on mill rate, and my next slide is going to be talking about some very hypothetical examples if you were to fund some of these projects on these 2 different pathways. So I gave you 3 numbers. It's just a range. It's very conservative. People who know me know how conservative I can be. And so typically when I show these kinds of tax impacts, it's on the high end. And once we fine tune and narrow down what it is exactly the project is gonna cost, we can fine tune and narrow down these tax impacts. So 14, I just ran 3 scenarios, 14, 18, and 22. The impact on your mill rate would increase 58 cents, 73 cents, and 87 cents. Again, move the decimal over 2, and it's $87 on a $100,000 home. So tax impact for these different projects shown with the assumption of using a 3.75 interest rate, which we all know is very conservative. It's more than a full percentage above current market for a 20-year bond. We're showing a little growth in your tax base, about 1%. We're applying some state aid to the new debt payments because you get aided on new debt. So there's some assumptions in here. And just to put that into perspective, I don't know why I remember this, but I'm pretty sure the mill rate for the high school was $1.71. I'm pretty sure when we went out for that referendum, it was $1.71. So the tax impact is much lower. It's also, these are lower borrowing amounts too, because I think the high school, well, I have that. I have that on the next slide. Yep, so that's your tax impact. Then we go to, this is just more an FYI, so if anyone would ask what your recent referendum history is, when you went to vote, what amounts, what type of referendum. Now you can see these first 2 that are listed here for 2016, those were what I talked about before, that increasing your operating dollars, that's what you were at. You passed in 2016 a recurring revenue limit override to increase your operating dollars. So that left side of the tax levy slide that I showed you, so $1,460,000. Great job, because I'm sure that's put you in a pretty good place in terms of balancing your budget. Then you go back down to, I think, well, yeah, April of 2014 is the high school, and that was $27,980,000. And then we had 2 questions there for the auditorium. Auditorium failed, and then we came back and passed the auditorium. So again, just history on your referendums. It's good to have these facts when you get asked as board members. I also put some in a list here for you to look at. We don't have to go through this whole list, but this is what are your neighbors doing? Because a lot of times when you're going through this process, you're saying, oh, Baldwin just added something, well, new athletic facility. So you know kind of what some of your neighbors are doing. And some of these are pretty north, but these are kind of some of the more recent referendums that are near your district in that area of the state. And then the final slide that I have for you is just timing on election dates. In both 21, you have February and April for primary and in general. But you have to decide, if you go February, the spring primary next year, as a board, you'd have to have your projects decided upon by December 8th, because that's when the formal resolution would need to be adopted. That might be an aggressive timeline. And then the spring is April. The spring general is April, and you would have to decide and adopt the resolution as a board by January 26th of 21. There are no fall elections, and I would say 2 or 3 years ago, legislation was passed in the state that there are no more special elections. So you can't just pick any day. You would have to pick a day where it's either a primary or a general. And again, in odd years, there's none in the fall. In even years, there's spring and fall.
Lisa, thank you very much for kind of walking through both the potential to refinance the high school at lower interest rates and the impact for our larger taxpayer community, and then also walking us through just kind of the steps the board would have to take for voter-approved funding if we're able to move forward with the conceptual designs that SDS presented just before you.
Yep. you're welcome.
All right. Any questions from the community? Well, I want to thank you and SDS and Andy and Kyle. Probably more Wizard of Oz work than anybody understands how we just pulled that off. But really appreciate everybody working together, and you were very clear and we could hear you well, so thank you.
You're welcome. We'll talk soon.
Yes, thanks, Lisa. Great presentation. All right, we'll move to item 7, presentation of the budget.
We're gonna just, one last piece and then we're moving to the budget. So for the recording, because this is also being recorded, I just have to drop in for Mr. Flaherty that we had SDS Architects with Chelsea Vorse presenting on the building pathways and kind of focusing on students' staff safety via secured front entrances. That was then followed by Baird Financial with Lisa Vossen for school finance that's looking at the two things that we just covered. The last, in summation, I just wanted, before we get into our district budget for the fiscal year 2020-2021, is this was a lot of information. The school board's been working with SDS for over 18 months. They've had multiple work sessions. They've evaluated and rank ordered their values, and then also have looked at 6 different conceptual designs and narrowed it down to those 2 pathways. The board is, and part of its strategic direction, and noted in its mission and vision, is to make sure that we continue to stay engaged with our community. And so during the month of October, School Perceptions Survey Company is partnering with the district that will be sending out to 100% of all households to canvass for feedback from our community in a 5 to 7 minute survey. And the question might be, what is the survey and why is it being asked for the board? And partly, it's a different methodology that's been used before. It is not just a random sample, but rather going through to all households in all of the municipalities that are part of the Prescott Public Schools. That will give every resident a paper pencil description of the pathways that you just saw presented by SDS. It will describe the work that's been done and some of the forward-looking projections on what the cost would be for the infrastructure and creating those safe, controlled entranceways. We want to make sure that before we move forward in any kind of discussion for any voter-approved funding, that the community first is educated about the decisions or the information that the board has been processing for 18 months. We want to make sure that people understand that time continues to march on and that there are some facility needs that cannot be ignored. And we want to make sure that before we invest both the time, energy, and ultimately the money, we want to make sure that before we invest in money, that the plan should be designated based on the wishes of the community in partnership with the school board. The survey information will be presented in the month of November by School Perceptions. It will allow both by demographics for that information to be sliced and diced, to look at whether or not you have students enrolled in the school district, if you work for the school district, or whether or not you are affiliated, or if you're a community member in support of public education. So there's a lot of different demographic information that'll be captured. We want to make sure that the board has the information to understand what level of support and whether or not we've connected the message to the concerns of our community, but also the tax tolerance of the community. The board, one of the things I just wanted to note in the first slide by Lisa Vossen, there was a typo on that. So the bond that was in gray was to be paid off by March 2021. So when she said that it was paid off early, again, saving taxpayers money. And then the board will use that data to finalize any voter-approved funding question that they might choose to go forward if it's required to complete the projects. So again, in the month of October, 100% of the households will be receiving this survey. It's paper pencil. It also can be done online, and so the opportunity is you can go on and click, or you can mail it in. It'll be a self-addressed envelope that will go back to school perceptions. The district will have additional surveys should more members in the household of voting age would like to inquire or have another ballot sent to them, or a survey sent to them. So with that, we wanted to be able to now transition into the presentation of the projected budget. Understanding that the community has the right to understand how its dollars are being spent. I'm going to be asking our finance coordinator, Renee Peterson, to come up to the podium. Every year, we receive some additional information that's provided as of July 1. Know that there are always moving targets because our funds are based on both enrollment and also that includes summer school, which is data that we're currently pulling together. Because of COVID, that was a very challenging way of distributing our coursework and enrolling students. So some of our students did it online. We did have students come on site, and we're trying to put that quilt together. The best news for our community and for our district is that enrollment at this time will be captured on Friday, the 18th. Ms. Linderholm will be submitting that enrollment number to the state, and that is our third Friday count. There is also a second January count. Preliminary estimates on enrollment for the Prescott Public Schools looks at that we are consistent with where we were a year ago, with potentially a handful more students enrolled. The biggest ticket will be understanding how we performed in the summer school arena. So at least for enrollment, funding looks to be consistent. The Department of Revenue recently put out information talking about the collections. Obviously, it's a lagging indicator. So how that plays out is just a reminder of our finance train. The information that Renee will be presenting to you is a 3-year glimpse of our funds and our ones that have been, our budgets for the last 2 years that have been audited, and then the projection for the upcoming year. What you'll see is also our fund balance. The reason I make mention of that is the green arrow going to the left. We received financing from the Department of Revenue in July and August, and that's to finalize the money for the last fiscal year. Between now and January, we receive only 21% of the funding that we need to keep our doors open, pay everybody, and also invest in the additional technology and also supplies trying to abate COVID within our schools. So as you can imagine, the January and February is a time that we usually have had historically taken a short-term loan to pay our staff. I believe, and Renee will talk about it, but I believe it's been at least 3 years since we've ever had to draw on that line of credit. Next week at the board meeting, we will probably ask for that line of credit to be extended as a safety net, but something that we're proud that we haven't had to draw on. And at this point, we do not believe we will have to draw on that short-term loan. So one of the things that's different about how that train comes in is that it comes in at different points of the year. The cars have different amounts of money each month that they stop. One of the concerns that we had with the Department of Revenue is they can only give schools the amount of money that they've received. And so if the tax revenue does by quarter dip because of COVID, it is possible that that train either could be delayed or that the cars are not completely full. So the district is taking steps this year to be very conservative and hold its budget and looking at reductions in certain areas as we progress. And we understand that the next biennium budget that will be coming from Madison is not promised. And so that will impact 2021 and 21-22. So with that, I'm going to ask Renee to come up, and I will queue up your 3-year view and turn it over to Renee Peterson. Welcome.
so next week we will go to the board and just ask to have our line of credit extended. I wasn't sure if we should continue to do that, but our auditors recommended it, just because, let's just say something does happen with the state revenue and it is delayed, we need to be able to have access to a line of credit at any time where we wouldn't have to come back to the board and ask approval, because that would take time. So if we're banking on our money coming.
Oh, it's on. You may have to pull the mask.
Oh.
You have to pull the mask, or we have to pull the mic off.
Okay.
Just go a little closer.
Can you hear me now? Better? No? You just want me to talk louder?
Yes.
I can talk louder. All right, so we are going to go to the board next week and ask to have our line of credit at the bank extended. That is just a safety net if we have a delay in our revenue from the state, so that we have access to cash to make our payroll in December and January before that tax money comes in. That line of credit, if we don't have that, the auditors recommend we have that, because if we don't have it, we would have to come to the board when we need to borrow the money, and that takes time. We would have to call a special meeting if we're in like a time crunch. We have taken out that or extended our line of credit the last 2 years and have never tapped into it. So we just have a line of credit for the emergencies. The last time we tapped into it was 2017. That's when I started. I didn't know if we needed it or not. We tapped into it and we paid it back within 30 days. So we didn't really need it, but it was just that safety net, because I wasn't absolutely positive on when the money was coming in, if it was coming in, and that whole timeline. So that'll be next week at the regular board meeting that we'll ask for that, but just a heads up. So our proposed budget, so we have our audited 18-19, our unaudited 19-20, and our potential budget for 2021. Revenue funding sources 100s are our taxes, oh no, transfer in. We don't have any transfers in for Fund 10. Our 200s are taxes and our fees to students, our admission money, anything that interest income, which is pretty much null this year with the low interest rates. Our funding source 200s, our local sources, has gone down just because we are not going to have any admission money for sporting events, auditorium, what else? Our rental of the facilities is gonna go down, so that all goes in that local source area. The inter-district sources are money coming in for open enrollment. The next category is the intermediate sources, that's our CESA grants. The 600 source state sources are transportation aid, our library aid, our equalization aid. Those are all calculations based from the state. The federal sources are our title grants. If you see that it kind of fluctuates, we have a DOJ grant a couple of years ago, then we had none last year, and then it's going back up because we have some more federal grants that we are receiving. Our final source of income is our Medicaid. It's our Fund 10 portion of the SPED Medicaid reimbursements that we get. Moving on to our expenses, for Fund 10 is our general fund. Instructional, that instruction is all of our teachers, teacher supplies, the activities, all of our activities. We're gonna have a lot of, well, we'll probably have same expenses for activities with no revenue coming in. Then we have our support services, which is counselors, psychologists, administration, facilities, our bus drivers, all of our kind of support staff behind the scenes are in that category. Our non-program is our transfer to SPED, our sub, helping out SPED, and then tuition for programs that we offer at the high school that are outside of what we offer actually in the building. So we have some college courses, all those expenses come out of that area. So we are hoping for revenue to equal our expenses this year. We're hoping that none of our revenue sources back out or get reduced. Next section is the Special Project Fund, which consists of our Fund 21, which is our gifts and grants, also holds all of our club accounts. So the golf club, golf teams, our dance team, they do fundraisers, that money goes in there, their expenses come out of there. Also in that area is our special ed. So when you look at total revenue and total expenses, it's really high because of our special ed department. That does not carry a fund balance, so that is money in, money out. All the expenses are subsidized through Fund 10 if they go over the state aid portion for special ed or any of our grants that we have.
And Renee, does that also, the difference between 2018 and then the last 2 years, does that include the Fund 60 and Fund 21 merge?
Yes, so when GASB 84 came along and said we could no longer have our dance clubs fundraisers and our golf team fundraisers or any supplies that the kids were paying for, you know, they all wanted matching skirts or that could not run through our custodial account, which is our Fund 60 anymore, so that all had to go to our Fund 21. So going from 18-19 to 19-20, that's where you see that jump in the fund balance. That is our Fund 60 getting transferred into our Fund 21. Those are reserved funds. Only the teams can get to that money, or that's where, like, if somebody donates $1,000 to go towards a specific donation, that's where that money would go. Goes in there to be used for a specific expense.
Thank you.
Then we have our debt service fund. That is our board and voter approved debt. There's two different classifications. You refer back to Lisa Vassen's little bar chart. The way it's set up, it gradually gets where our expenses are climbing and then they plateau off. So you're gonna see the next couple of years where our revenue and expenses increase a little bit and then they should plateau unless we refinance. The options for refinancing are to plateau them right off the bat, so they'll probably increase next year, but then they'll be plateaued from there until the bonds are paid off, is what she is projecting. So the difference why there's a difference between the revenue and expenses, I have to levy for the money that we get from taxpayers. That's our revenue. I have to levy for calendar year, and the expenses are for fiscal year. So they'll never equal. Any questions on debt? That can be confusing with the revenue and expense not equaling. But capital projects, this is our Fund 46. And that is for future expenses to our facilities 10-year plan, right? Yeah. So currently we have $615,000. We've been putting away anytime we have funds available. And we're hoping that we can put away $25,000 this year. We will not go to the board to do that until the end of the school year. Once we know where we're sitting, we're not gonna automatically just put it in there because it's approved tonight. If the funds aren't there, or if we're nervous about not receiving revenue, we wouldn't put that in there unless there were funds available. And we will look at that, I think we decided May or June board meeting.
Correct. And then Renee, just to remind people, this was also part of Lisa Boston's kind of presentation where you look at where you can start to tap into money for capital. This money, however, is in a lockbox until?
Until August 2022.
Correct.
Yes.
So
Yep.
it's there, it's gaining interest, and then it's part of the 10-year plan, and once August 2022 hits in, that's how we'll start to allocate dollars rather than take it out of Fund 10.
Correct.
Can we ask a question
Yeah.
about this one? Just for the clarity, there's a big jump in 2019-20 with the revenues. It was, we put in 225,000.
Yes.
Can we talk a little bit about what that was?
So at the, was it May or June board meeting, we came and we said, we're gonna assess where we're sitting financially towards the end of June and look at how much we kind of saved with minimal expenses when we went virtual, because we thought it was temporary. Now we know we have to do more virtual learning, and we've had to spend a lot more on cameras, webcams. So this year we probably won't have any extra, but you as a board decided up to 200,000 additional, depending on where we were sitting at the end of the year. We waited till the end of the year and put those funds in. As far as where we saved, it was, I don't really know.
Okay.
It's a little everywhere in cleaning supplies when the kids aren't here, because we still paid all of our staff through the COVID funds, so all staff were paid. It would be in supplies, cleaning supplies, and expenses in the general fund. Does that answer your question,
Yep,
Mike?
I think so.
Okay. Food service. Food service is meant to be self-sufficient and has been the last how many years. So Tina does for all buildings plus St. Joe's and has carried a healthy fund balance. She has a guideline that she needs to kind of have a set fund balance to be self-sufficient. Her and I go through that in January to set the rate that we charge each student at that time. So in January was before COVID. Then we got hit with extra expenses. So her fund balance went down drastically based on we get a lot of our food service revenue from the a la carte items. So high school, middle school, a la carte items are where Tina gets her revenue, basically. Otherwise, it's pretty much a break-even point. So because we lost out on that money, and families had a lot of balances in their account at the end of the year, we can't count those as revenue because it's technically money owed to families. Her fund balance went down. We are projecting revenue expenses to be slightly higher this year due to COVID. We had to increase time that our food service staff are in the building because we have to stagger lunches. So food service has increased. We are hoping that she can still capture some a la carte revenue and maintain a healthy fund balance.
So Renee, just and this will be important for next week at the board meeting because we'll have a discussion about food service. We were fortunate enough to participate in some of the national and extended summer school offerings. Tina and her staff worked all the way through the month of July, but we were reimbursed by the federal government, but not by families. So we provided anybody 18 years and younger additional food. and breakfast and lunch. We are looking, especially with our hybrid model, to be able to provide lunch for the students when they're not on campus. So if at the middle school and high school, starting next week, if you are here on Tuesday and Wednesday, you won't be here on Thursday and Friday. And so for our students, we will be presenting a different way of distributing food on a weekly basis, which will keep our food service busy, but that there are national programs, state programs, and federal programs we'll be putting forth whether or not we, with a fund balance that decreased nearly $40,000, whether or not we can continue to provide food for everybody at no cost. So that'll be a discussion point for next week.
The Community Service Fund is our community ed program and our community recreation. So PCR and community ed, their fund balance did go down. They are looking at doing more virtual. Well, community ed is looking at doing more virtual, and PCR is trying to work with the public health to keep the sports for our youth going. So we were conservative on expenses and revenue coming in, just because it'll be a scaled down model. We won't need as much equipment, therefore you can't make the families pay the fees that they have paid in the past. The next section, we don't have any of these cooperative programs. Those are if we were in a consortium with other school districts and worked with like a CISA group to do some of our programs. The total funds is a summary of everything. The proposed tax levy. So you look at proposed tax levy from the last 3 years. It increased last year. It's gonna increase again this year. But overall, when you look at how it increases, our mill rate is actually staying the same. So because the values of the homes in the district are going up, therefore the tax levy gets spread out more evenly for the school district's portion. The major increase is in our debt service, but refer back to Lisa's presentation, has it increases and then plateaus. Our debt service will increase in the next couple of years and then plateau off.
I'm not stealing your presentation. I'm just gonna put your mill rate slide up. Should be able to drive this better. I apologize. So you want to just quickly reiterate the mill rate?
So mill rate, I think Lisa had a little slide showing how it's calculated, taking the equalization value of all of the property in the district and dividing that out to get our mill rate. So the mill rate has decreased over the years and it is starting to be more consistent. So that is a good thing for our district.
And I'll bring you back to the final funds, or do you want to go right into ask any questions before we go to the resolutions?
Yeah, the last page of the portion that was publicized is it's a legal page that I just have to report the energy efficiency, and those are all, basically I just have to put it on paper what's at DPI for the public to see. So does anybody have questions about the budget?
Do you recall what the energy efficiency savings were contracted to be?
We're contracted to be?
So
Well, this is what is contracted to be. So this is what, when we started the project, this is what we had to report at DPI. So basically, I just take it from the DPI website and put it here.
These aren't actual numbers.
No.
So when would we see the actual savings? Because I know if we don't meet those savings, Train will recoup the difference, so I just wanna make sure that's covered.
Correct. We got rebates throughout the year last year, and we compared the rebates to what we received to what they projected to receive
I think,
by provider, I believe. So they did rebates with each different provider. We tracked, okay, we were supposed to get from X company, we got it. So that was one thing that we did track last year to make sure we did receive the rebates, and I think we actually received all rebates that Train projected. But as far as the energy cost savings,
I would have to, Mike, do you know, does that come on an annual basis?
That changed some, well, I'll have to actually dig into that more, how that, because it changed from what it was a couple years ago.
Okay, so Mike, because he's not mic'd, I think, Steve, what we can do is bring you back as a board. There is an outside audit with regards to energy efficiency. I just don't know how often it comes, if it's once a year or every 2 years, and we can bring that for the board for presentation.
Yeah, that should be annually based on our utilities, essentially, so.
Right.
But Train should help get that done. But thank you, yeah, just curious.
I learned a lot with this one because I actually had to call DPI. I'm like, where do I get these numbers? Because last year, they said I only had to report on the one building. Now this year, they said all energy efficiency. And when I called DPI, he basically just told me to go to a different portion of their website and fill it out from there. So there was no pulling it from our data. It was basically to just refresh the public on what year we are in and year of the payments and where we were sitting on those energy efficiencies.
Thank you.
Any other questions on budget? So resolution, we need to adopt the tax levy. This is for state law or regular, well, it has to be done by October or November 1st.
So let's clarify, right? So this is based on information that will be updated in October.
Yes.
And it comes from DPI. So this is a preliminary adoption of the budget, but doesn't get finalized by the board until its October meeting. So some of these numbers fluctuate slightly, but it's never been dramatically different.
Correct. Usually our revenue limit does not, that operating number does not. It's basically how it sways of what portion is tax and what portion comes from the state. So our total revenue coming in won't change. It'll just be that operating line would change and our total tax levy. So not that we, between now and October, I think 8th is when they come out. It's not we're gonna have more revenue, it's just that pendulum. Will we get more from the state, then we get less from the taxpayers. Or if we get less from the state, we have to get more from the taxpayers. We have a set revenue limit, and I can't go over that revenue limit, so that's where that pendulum kind of sways. So if I change this, I believe that's when we would have to get the board together and re-adopt the tax levy if that changes. If it doesn't change, this is our resolution.
Okay. Do you want to walk through just the total amount and then the lines?
Yes, so total amount is $9,635,075, which consists of our operating of $6,293,288. No chargebacks expected. Our board-approved non-referendum debt is $372,399, and our voter-approved debt, referendum debt, $2,819,388. Community service, we're going to continue requesting $150,000. That is the same as last year, in the hopes that we can open back up and have spring sports and have more community-based projects through community ed, hopefully skiing.
All right, so at this time, I think we are ready to entertain any motions on Resolution A.
I move to approve the resolution A adoption of tax levy in the amount of $9,635,075.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? Does anybody have any comments or questions before we vote? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. Thanks, Renee. All right, we are on to, let me get back to my meeting here. Resolution B, salaries of board members. So Rick, do you maybe want to tee this one up?
Last year, there was a change, and there was a slight increase of $200. Currently, the board does not differentiate across the positions, from the board chair to vice chair, clerk, treasurer, and member at large. It is a $2,000 stipend for the incredible amount of time and dedication you give to this community. Does anybody have a willing to put forward a resolution for the board stipend?
I make a motion to compensate the board members in the amount of $2,000 each for the 2021 school year.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this one?
Mike, do you want to repeat the motion just because it
Yep.
wasn't in the mic?
So the motion was made to compensate the board $2,000 each for the upcoming 2020-21 school year.
And it's been seconded?
And it has been seconded. Any comments or any questions on this one? Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? That carries. Thank you. On item resolution C, reimbursement of board members' expenses.
Yes, as board members, many of you know that there are opportunities for you either to participate up in our CISA 11 or with our Wisconsin School Board Association, and that there are fall and winter meetings. This is to say that when you travel and stay for those professional development trips that are out of district, that we would reimburse you for your actual expenses.
All right, so at this time, we will entertain any motion for the resolution.
I'll move to reimburse the board members for actual expenses out of district and conducting the business of board education.
I'll second.
We do have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. And item resolution D, set the annual meeting date?
Yes. So a couple of years ago, we shifted. It is possible for somebody to make a motion here tonight that there would be a specific time and date for the next annual meeting. As you can imagine, we've had a lot of challenges that have historically thrown us for a loop, and we needed to have a better opportunity at the end of the year of a school board to kind of set when, prior to October, that when we would have the meeting. Obviously with COVID, that's even been more challenging, and so at this time, there is a recommendation to continue to allow the school board to set the date and time to conduct this annual business meeting to prepare the budget prior to the third October session. So what we're looking at is the opportunity for the board to set the date at a regular meeting, but usually you do that in the summertime in a regular session rather than doing it now.
All right. So moved. Can we accept that?
Yeah.
So we'll say so just to clarify, the motion is to allow the school board to set a date and time for the 2020 school board meeting, but before the third Wednesday in October. Okay.
That's correct. And you need a second?
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. And we are at the end of our meeting. We will need a motion to adjourn.
One, just to remind people that this is coming to the end of a annual meeting. However, there is a special board meeting with a one item that will recess probably 5 minutes right after the conclusion of this meeting.
Correct. So we will take a motion to adjourn if anybody wants to
So moved.
make that motion.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. We are adjourned. Good job.
For the listening audience, while we switch over, we are going to be moving from a annual community member to meeting to a public hearing where at this point, individuals who are not in the room and are watching via live stream would be able to pose comments. Just out of curiosity, do you guys need a break at all, or do I just need to signal them to kind of change the stream?
I'd say let's go.
All right.
Ready to roll?
Let's go.
One item.
Yeah. Are we good back there?
Well done. All right. And Rick,
Give me
for my clarification, in the Google Drive, it's special meeting agenda September 16th, 2020.
Correct.
That's what I can follow that one.
I just have to get this up.
Does Kyle have to kind of cut over now or set up something, anything different? Or
Okay, he's going to step out, tell us if we're good.
the Oz,
We're good. All right.
Oz behind the curtains?
So now you do have to open it like the regular.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, welcome. This is Board of Education regular meeting. I will call the meeting to order, subject section 1983 Wisconsin statutes. The first item is to adopt the agenda. Dr. Spacuzza, are there any changes to the agenda here?
There are no changes.
So we'll take a motion. And this is a board meeting now, so we actually have to make the motion.
I move to accept the agenda.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? If that carries, we're on item C, recognition of visitors. Is there anybody in the audience that would care to be recognized at this time? Does that include online as well?
Not for this part. The only time the online is in reference to the
Okay.
public hearing specific to the waivers.
All right. we will move to item D, public hearing.
All right, so just for clarification, the notices that went out, all of this was put out in a timely manner. As we continue, as you can imagine, there are legal updates coming multiple times during the week for all of us and individuals through school board associations and superintendents. We are obligated to have a public hearing to get feedback from the community prior to you taking a business action on a waiver to DPI. So we did in spring, as you recall, we did have a couple waivers that we submitted to DPI based on COVID. Because it's a two-step dance, we thought that we would put that forward now since we had a captive audience, we had the streaming, and it would allow us, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to move forward. What we're asking is for comment, and so it gives the opportunity for us to put this out into the public. We can gather comment, and then also whenever it comes back, some of these we will put on the September 23rd, but not all of them. So at this time, because of COVID, there are certain obligations that we are, that DPI as the organized agency for public education, they can modify rules or grant us provisions. However, there are some things that are in state statute that are dictated, and we do not have the ability unless we specifically submit a waiver. So at this time, we wanted to have feedback from the community with regards to 4 very specific waivers that we likely are going to move forward on. The first one is very similar to what we did last year, and with the change that we just had to put in place with the high school and middle school moving to a hybrid model. It's going to be very challenging for us to guarantee that we can hit all of the instructional minutes that are required in the legislative statutes. Our goal is to continue to make sure that we provide quality education online and be able to meet the needs of our students throughout the year, but to have I guess the challenge for us, given that Mondays are virtual and are not full-time, it is highly unlikely that we'll meet all instructional minutes, and we'd like to just get that submitted and approved by DPI. Secondly, it's a waiver with regards to teacher certification and licensure requirements. Again, all of these waivers are a one-time, 1 year only, and it's based on the 2021 school year. Under no circumstance are we looking to replace any teachers or hire people that aren't licensed, but there are times where we do have teachers that will be isolated or quarantined, and given that we have students on site, we may have to put a supervisor or a teaching aide in the classroom while the teacher is delivering the instruction via technology, very similar to the Baird presentation and SDS. Third, we do have the obligation anytime that the school district is open based on our food service that we provide daily milk. Given that some students are no longer going to be on campus 100% of the time, we would be likely asking for a waiver. We are looking at dissemination options and working with Tina and our food service, but obviously milk is perishable and very difficult for us to figure out that we could give 100% of the milk on a daily basis. Fourth and finally, we do have educator effectiveness. Initially, this is one that we likely are asking a waiver and want feedback, but likely would not be submitted early. We believe that we can still provide feedback and observation for our staff and students, our teachers as they deliver either on-site or through a hybrid model. I want to reserve the right to be able to have at least had the public hearing and get feedback from the community. There are many obligations with how many times a teacher is observed and the type of feedback. Many districts are struggling, and even DPI has said that delivery of instruction in a classroom based on the training is very different than many of our teachers who are doing it online. And so we want to reserve the right that we might not be able to dot all the i's and cross all the t's with regards to educator effectiveness, but we would continue to provide observation and feedback to our licensed staff. So it's not to do away with it, it's just making sure that if we're unable to meet all the requirements, we wouldn't be left high and dry. So at this point, that concludes our portion of the waivers that we are putting forward. It gives the opportunity of anybody in the room here to provide feedback to the school board as they discern prior to administration bringing these back forward. So I guess I would defer to see if anybody in the audience would like to speak. And I'm looking back at our monitor, and we have no one online that is in the comments section. So at this point, I just want to summarize is that these waivers, a couple of them will come forward on the 23rd. Public would be able to, in the regular comment section, if they wanted to give additional feedback, can do so. If they want to submit any comments to the school board or to the superintendent, they may email me directly, and my email address is on our website. The school board, and we're still working, both Beth Linderholm and I were on a webinar yesterday with both the School Board Association and legal. There is some opportunity in language that they are trying to clarify if it would stand, but would allow you to delegate the opportunity for, as a superintendent, to submit any additional waivers as they come forward in the year if necessary. Obviously, there would be an update, but it gives you the opportunity rather than holding multiple public hearings. But at this point, these are the 4 core ones that we saw as essential. So with that, I conclude our portion of the public hearing.
All right. So we can move on to item E, recognition of visitors. And I do not believe there's anybody that cares to be recognized. Is there? Nobody online? Wouldn't matter.
Correct.
All right. We'll move on to item F, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That carries. We're adjourned. Thank you very much.
To all of you that were here online or in person, thank you very much. Kyle and Andy,